Hey free-to-play gang, welcome back to another video. And as you can hear, the mic is actually working pretty well right now, and I kind of figured out like what the issue was. So I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly show you guys what are the filters that I'm using for OBS, so that in case you want to emulate me or you want to use the same microphone, it's not sponsored by the way. These are the settings that I'm using for my OBS right now, and it's working perfectly. So I think it's mostly the noise gate that is removing the echo from my room, because my room is like, for some reason, I think it's very tall, and therefore there's a lot of echo coming from the room, but I guess I have it fixed, so we can move on to the rest of today's video. Alright, so let's start with the Abilimon tier list, and I know this is something that a lot of you guys have requested for the longest period of time, and I'm only just going to talk about the legendary espers because I think in terms of like epic espers, yes, you might be a little bit short on epic Abilimons at the start, but that's going to change a lot for you dramatically. Like maybe after like 2 months of playing, you start to realize that hey, I have so much excess epic Abilimons anyway, so that don't really matter all that much. Now, of course, everything that I say here, like I said all the time, right? This is entirely based on my own opinion, based on my own experience with the game. Nothing I say should influence you in any way. It should just be something that you take note of because I have used certain espers in this scenario, I've used certain espers in that scenario, and I've also realized that, hey, maybe there are better alternatives, maybe there are cheaper alternatives, all that kind of stuff. It also doesn't mean that, hey, you like one esper, but because of what I say, therefore you don't build that esper, right? So that is not true at all. So everything that I say here, take it with a grain of salt, take it with a whole jar of salt, right? So there's going to be 4 main tiers, and I just want to make it very, very simple for you guys, right? So there's going to be the important tier, which means that the esper only truly shines when he has full skill ups. And there is also the A tier, which is useful tier, meaning to say that it is quite useful. Yeah, it is quite useful if the esper is fully skilled up, because that's going to push his theme a little bit more, right? It's going to improve his efficacy a little bit more as well. And B is going to be not urgent, which means you probably don't need to invest into this esper ASAP, because it's not going to change a lot for his kit, or rather it might change for his kit, right? It might make him a lot better, but in terms of like clearing content, it is not something that takes a lot of priority in my opinion. And of course, we are going to end off with the C tier, which is completely not worth it, which means it doesn't really make a lot of sense for you to put skill ups into this esper because you're not going to get a lot of value out of it. And I think in most cases, right, especially for my channel where I focus a lot on value, a lot on efficacy, these 4 main tiers are very important to me, and that's all we need to talk about. Alright, so we're going to start off with Abigail, and you already know what I'm going to say. She's going to go straight into S tier, and the reason for that is she needs the full skill ups because that makes her AP push from 70% all the way to 100%, which is immensely important, right? So let's say if your Gaius died, for example, and you have an Abigail on your team, your Abigail can revive that Gaius, push his AP from 0 all the way to 100%. So that 100% AP push is super important if you want to counter certain speed clips, for example. But it's not so important if you are sure that you're going to survive. If let's say you are sure that your Gaius, even though he takes the second turn, he is still going to survive, then he has a little bit of AP in his tank, and therefore that 70% AP push is enough, right? So if that's the case, then that's fine. But in most cases, you want to revive an esper that is at 0% HP, which means 0% AP as well. So you want to push the esper all the way to 100%. So Abigail, definitely S tier. Now next we have Ahmed. I'm going to put in at B tier. Okay, so the thing is, I have used Ahmed at no skill ups for the longest period of time. And I don't even think that if I'm at anywhere lower than point was 17, right? Because I'm currently at 18 right now. But if I'm anywhere lower than 17, I probably wouldn't even invest into Ahmed in terms of skill ups. He functions perfectly fine as a healer, and yeah, basically just a backup healer and a cooldown reducer at 0 skill ups. So there is a big fear for me that, if you pump skill ups into him, you might actually upgrade his first skill instead, which increases his damage like what I have right over here. So that's something that I wouldn't advise for you guys, right? This skill cooldown, probably not urgent at all. It's just the healing amount, which means that this is more of like an end game requirement, so definitely B tier in my opinion. Now next up we have Ashley, and I'm gonna say that she is probably not important to fully skill up because she is effective from the get-go. Her main selling point is her golden buff, and that is not gonna change if you invest into skill ups or not, right? Because all you need to do is turn 1, drop your skill, gain the buffs, and that's about it. Done. Your speed cliff is done. But in terms of like PvE content where you need her to cycle her skills a little bit more, it's not so urgent that you have her in the first place, or for like PvE content. She might be good in like maybe Darkstar Lord, right? But apart from that, maybe Fafnir, maybe in Chronos, but it's not like super urgent. It's not like an esper that you definitely need her to be fully skilled up for her to function. That's not the case at all. Now next up we have Biondina. She's definitely going to go straight into C tier in my opinion, because as a PvP DPS esper, you don't really need her to be fully skilled up unless you really desperately need to strip all the buffs on a certain target, for example, because of Biondina's second skill, right? Her passive. So here you go, Tsunami, right? So in terms of skill ups, I don't think it's necessary at all. In terms of like her one-shot potential, she already has it at no skill ups, right? And in terms of like other PvE content, you're probably not going to be using her for DPS, you're going to be using her for like support. which means you really do not need the skill ups at all. Now moving on to the next Esper, Brewster has definitely changed a lot because of his R2 effect. So the thing is, if he's not at R2, I wouldn't recommend you to skill him up. I'd probably maybe put him in your wish pool, maybe put him in your wish list, but apart from that, okay, let's assume that you're currently at R2. If he is at R2, then yes, he does work very well with skill ups because he's able to cycle his passive, he's able to cycle his buff a lot better as well. So at the start, he's going to gain a few stacks of his golden buff, and when he takes his turn, he's going to gain more stacks. And when he's able to reset his cooldown again, which means take whatever turns that he needs, I think it's like 4 turns, right? He can throw his third skill again. So I feel like in terms of his general use, you are going to be using him in content where he needs to take multiple turns, be it like in the tower content, be it in Dark Starlord, be it in wherever PvP, right? He's going to need a lot of turns. So I feel like he is an Esper that is useful at full skill ups. Now next up on the list, we have Cecilia. I don't think she's really that worth it because all she really is just that one trick pony where she revives everyone, and I don't think that cooldown is really going to change a lot for her kit because her cooldowns are extremely long anyway. So reducing the cooldown is not going to be so big of a deal. And yes, you can say that, I don't know, maybe her healing potential gets better, but it's not such a big deal for her kit in my opinion. That's not like her main selling point. Now next up we have Clara, and she is definitely S tier. Very important for you to max her skill, especially for her third skill. So this skill has a cooldown that goes down to 4 turns, which is very important in like cycling, not just her healing, not just her cleansing, but also the AP pushing as well. So very important for a lot of different content, for like the Desolate Lands, for your tower content, for your Ritual Miracles as well. She's a really good healer in many of the Ritual Miracles, maybe not for Fafnir, but in the other two, yes, absolutely. So you just want to try to avoid her first skill, which is something that I managed to achieve out of sheer luck. Now next up we have Donar, and I'm gonna put him at C tier, not worth it, just because I don't feel like he's an Esper that is really worth building at all. Maybe not in the current climate, maybe for tanky meta, he is decent, but there are much better alternatives, right? I don't even feel like I would need to use a Donar at all, mainly because of his typing and mainly because he has low max HP, which means that he's easy to kill if you have true damage, for example. Now next up, I'll say Elliot goes into not urgent. He is an Esper that definitely thrives on extra skill ups because that increases his proc chance, but at the same time, I also feel like he is not necessarily an Esper that you are really going to use in a lot of different scenarios, right? You're probably only going to use him because of his third skill, which means you're more hyper-focused on the fact that he's very useful in R6, not so much useful below R6, although he is still useful at R6. But it's just that, you know, the main places that you're going to use him is to ensure that his cooldown reset sticks, and that's like the main reason why you want to use Elliot. So as you can see, right, Elliot's third skill here, it only increases his damage and his cooldown, which is quite forgettable because whenever he gets hit, his cooldown is going to go down by 1 anyway, so that 1 turn is not going to matter all that much in my opinion. Now next up we have Everett, and it's definitely in between useful and important. I would say that he is more towards useful, so for the mere reason that his damage mitigation actually goes up as you skill him up, right? Take a look at his third skill here. So while this ability is on cooldown, all allies take 20% less damage, which includes himself at R6. And as you can see, the damage mitigation actually increases from 15% to 20%. It is a big difference. But it's not like the primary importance at all, right? Because damage mitigation, some people just don't care about it. Some people don't need it at all. Now next up, we have the Fatum sisters. I'm going to put her at useful tier. And for the mere fact that she does require the skill cooldowns for her to function a little bit better as well because of her cycling, right? So let's take a look at her kit. So mostly her second and third skill, right? Because look at her cooldowns, extremely long. We have 5 turns over here and we have 6 turns on her third skill as well. But the thing is, we kind of want to have her debuffs, we kind of want to have her buffs as well. We kind of want to have her AP reduction. We need the speed up, we need the healing, we need the invincibility. We need a lot of these stuff to cycle a lot better rather than just rely on her first skill, which just decreases the AP. So all in all, I feel like she's an Esper that would definitely thrive very well with skill ups. Now next up we have Nussy, and she's definitely going to go into S tier. So it's super important that you have her third skill on a 4 turns cooldown so that she can spam it, and she can spam it super well because going between her second and third skill, she's going to gain a lot of speed up for your team, she's going to give a lot of AP for your team, she's going to increase the cooldowns of all of your enemies and all that. There is a lot of reason why you want her to be fully skilled up, and she is very powerful in many different content when at full skill ups. Now next up we have Gabrielle. She's definitely going to go straight to S tier, so I think in most cases, a lot of the supports are actually going to go into S tier for the mere fact that they carry a lot when their cooldowns are reduced by a great deal. And the thing is, unlike the Fatum sisters, Gabrielle is actually very useful in many different content, right? Like the rest of these Espers here as well. They are very useful in a multitude of content, and the full skill ups really change their kit a lot. Like it really helps them so much. So in terms of Gabrielle, she's very useful in many different content right now. So the full skill ups is very important so that her cooldown is a little bit lower so that she can spam it as well. Now next up we have Gaius, and he's definitely going to go into S tier, and I think he's probably one of the few DPS Espers that will belong to S tier. And the reason for that is without skill ups, right? Without skill ups at all, especially on his third skill, you're not able to move wave to wave to wave using his second skill all the time. So you're actually going to transform on the first wave, and then on your second wave, you need to wait 1 turn before you can transform again. But that is completely mitigated if you raise Gaius up to full skill ups, for example, right? Especially 3rd skill. So that's how his cycling is needed, and so that he can make a lot of your runs super fast, be it like Sonic Rift, be it your Ritual Miracles, be it like event maps, whatever, right? Tower content as well. You need him to cycle so well that he clears every single wave on every single start of his turn. Now next up we have height, and I'm actually going to put him at not urgent. Now my height himself is like no skill ups at all, and I do use him and to great success as well. There is probably very little reason that I'll want to full skill him up unless I want to main him for whatever reason, right? Like maybe for PvP reasons. So I want to put all my emphasis on building a height account. So like let's say Frankenstein, for example. You guys have probably heard of him, right? So if that's the case, if you really want to hyper focus on height, then yeah, sure, go ahead, right? He's going to benefit a lot from skill ups because he's going to increase his damage as well, and the HP ceiling decrease also increases from 80% to 100%, which is okay. But most importantly is the damage output that he has, that is going to go up by a significant amount. And I guess the cooldown is not so important, but yeah, it's basically just the damage. Now next up we have Ife, and I'm actually going to put her at, I kind of want to put at not urgent, but yeah, at the same time, based on just how not effective she is in most content right now, I feel like she's just not worth it. Now moving on to Intisa, she's probably only really good in Chronos and maybe some specific other content like Darkstar Lord, maybe useful in the tower as well. But in terms of like skill ups, I feel like yes, she will definitely perform a lot better with full skill ups, and I might recommend you to use her with full skill ups like I do as well. But all in all, I feel like she's more niche in the sense that she's only better at certain content, and she's definitely replaceable in her role, right? So in terms of like defense breaks, in terms of like attack debuff, there are definitely experts that can replace her function. For example, for Chronos, right, you can definitely replace her with, let's say, the Black Twin, who has both the Seer debuff and the defense break as well. You may not really need to have the attack debuff, you may not really need to have the miss rate up. It's not super crucial. So because of that, I think I'm going to have to put her at in between not urgent and not worth it. I'll probably say like not urgent, because she's still really good with full skill ups. Now next up we have JJ, and I'm probably gonna put him at maybe I kind of want to put him at C tier because he don't really need to have the skill ups. His second skill, his passive, it doesn't decrease in cooldown with more skill ups. So that's I think like the main thing for him. In terms of like his DPS, yeah, he's just gonna increase his DPS from having extra skill ups, which I don't think is a priority for most DPS experts. Conversely, I think it is more important that your supports have the skill ups instead, because the cooldowns on some of your supports are actually quite big, quite important, right? Not so much for just pure DPS. Now next up we have Jin Yu Yao, and as you can see, I have her fully skilled up, and the reason for that is take a look at her passive, right? Her action point increase actually increases from I think 12% or 10%, right? It increases from 10% to 20%, which is a very big difference. So whenever one of your allies receive a debuff, she's going to increase her AP. And it's very important for a kid because you need her to jump her turn so that she can quickly remove all of that debuff from your team via her third skill. So as you can see here, the third skill is whatever that makes her so, well, impactful, right? And at the same time, the cooldown also reduces by 1 turn, which at R6 is quite potent as well, so that cycles her skill a little bit more frequently. It's not quite the same as Elliot in the sense that whenever Elliot gets hit, he's gonna reduce his cooldown because he is bound to get hit. It's very easy in the current meta to get hit by an AoE attack. So because of that, I am actually going to put her at useful. I think this is where she probably shines the most. It's not something that you urgently need at the start. Now next up we have Lewis, and I haven't actually skilled him out at all, and he's working perfectly fine for me, in my opinion, right? So he's just going to slow down his pace by like 1 turn, and that's about it, but it's not so big of a deal in my opinion. So I would think that I'll put him at useful tier so that he can probably cycle a little bit better, but in terms of his usefulness, he is still pretty decent at no skill ups at all. Now for Liling, I think this is a toss-up. It really depends on whether you even want to use him in the first place or whether you want to use him for specific content. Like for example, in the Deathload Lens, Shadow Fire, right? So the thing is, for me, I find him to be the most useful at no skill ups. And the reason is because with skill ups, his cooldown actually reduces by 1, right? And that actually throws me off my cycle just for Shadow Fire. But that I shouldn't use that as an example, but yeah, it's just something that I noticed. But I think in terms of skill ups, I think he actually excels a lot with skill ups, and him being at R6, I think that really makes a lot of difference. So he's actually going to absorb a lot of AP. Like from his third skill, he can absorb AP, and from his second skill, he can also absorb more AP. So he takes a lot of turns this way. So I think it probably rises in urgency as his R level goes up. So if he's at R6, maybe I would actually push him at like important tier so that he can cycle very well. Now next up we have Lucas, and I think this is a very hot topic that I've always said that he's like S tier, but a lot of people are always saying that he's completely not worth it and they regret it. So my opinion don't really change, right? So if you take a look at Lucas, the reason why I say that he needs the skill ups, and okay, I know I don't have skill ups on him, and the reason for that is because I don't really use him, okay? So the reason why I say that skill up is so important is because he reduces his cooldown by 2 turns on his third skill, which I think is quite important for his cycling. So be it tower content, be it PvP content, I think this cooldown reduction is actually very important because if he's not able to cycle his third skill, he's not able to absorb AP, he's not able to reduce AP, he's not able to strip as well. Or at least not so efficiently, which is a huge drawback in my opinion. And the same goes for his second skill, which is an AoE stun. So if this skill stays at 4 turns, it's actually pretty decent. But if it goes down to 3 turns, that makes him a lot more efficient. And of course, at the same time, his trigger chance goes up to 85%. So it's a really good thing for controlling espers that your trigger chances actually go up. So same for his third skill as well. So because of that, I still feel like he is an essential esper for you to max. Maybe not his first skill, but I think I'm gonna come in between and I'll probably put him at useful tier. Now, Garmr is probably an esper that I think is not worth it. No, don't get me wrong. I have seen him at R6. I know what he can do. I know he can cleave different defensive comps at 0.118, which is like the optimum level of PvP right now. So the reason why I say he's not worth it is because if you're going to hyper-focus so much onto Garmr, you're going to hyper-focus on the fact that that is what your PvP is going to look like. It's very hard for you to tweak the team. It's going to be like 4 buffing espers and 1 Garmr, and it's very hard for you to shift things around. And the thing is, it's super easy for you to counter Garmr teams. You just need to make sure that you either move faster or you can control them in some sense. Like let's say you have an Everett with like the Zeus set, or maybe you have a lot of Avatar on your team that has a lot of stuns. That is enough to probably ruin a Garmr offense, for example. It's very easy for you to counter it, basically. So in terms of PvP, I wouldn't really focus on Garmr. I would probably choose to focus on other espers that have more utility, or maybe it's a little bit easier for me to manipulate the team if I need to in the future as well. So Garmr probably C tier for me. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just the extra DPS that really changes for his kit, which is useful and is very important for his one-shot potential, but that's really all there is, right? Now, Ollie, I would say that he is probably not urgent because the thing is, you just need his passive to proc once, and that's what people fear the most. They are not so fearful of the fact that he's probably going to get his passive up again to protect his allies. So for example, if you're in RTA, you see an Ollie, the main thing that comes to your mind is, okay, he's going to prevent the death of one of his allies, right? So I need to take him out. So that's probably like the train of thought that most people have. They're not too worried about, oh, he's going to protect the ally right now, and he's going to protect the ally again in 4 turns. Yeah, I don't think that's the main train of thought that people have nowadays. Okay, and now for Ophelia, I don't feel like she is that urgent because I feel like she's able to one-shot regardless. Like right now, her DPS, my Ophelia right now, she's able to one-shot like a lot of different things without any skill ups. And I don't feel like I ever need the skill ups unless I need her third skill to come by more frequently. Like for example, if I'm using her with Abigail, right, and let's say Ophelia dies, then I need to revive her a couple of times before she can use her third skill again. So if I skill her up, it's gonna be less stressful for me. It's gonna be less stressful for Abigail as well. So that's probably where it matters more. So I'm just gonna put her at not urgent. Now next on the list we have Raven, and I feel like she's not an esper that you really need to focus so much on her skill ups for the mere fact that she's mostly a PvP esper, which means that she just needs to get her skills out at the start and that's about it, right? Her deed is done. So look at third skill, there is no increase in proc chance, there is no trigger chance increase, it's just damage increase and a 1 cooldown reduction, which like I said in PvP you just need to get it off on the first turn and that's it, right? Same goes for second skill as well, it's just extra DPS. And the thing is, Raven, she becomes more of a DPS esper at R6 because that's where she lands a defense break before landing her AoE attacks, for example. So in terms of most Ravens out there where it's not at R6, right, I don't think that investing into a skill ups just for DPS is that efficient. I'd rather you put the skill ups into other espers. So because of that, not worth it in my opinion. Now next up for Sally, I do feel like she is important to max skill up because of the cooldown reduction on her third skill, which allows her to cycle back into her sweet harvest state a little bit more efficiently, a little bit quicker as well, so that you have constant protection on your team, which is very, very important in my opinion, and her second skill as well. So especially when you're at R6, right, if you're able to get her to R6, it is very important that your skill cooldowns are super low because she's gonna use skills while she's in a sweet harvest state. So because of that, I think she's in between A and S tier, but I think, she's probably one of those espers that you might want to get her all the way to full skill up so that she's not just effective in PvE, but also effective in PvP. Now, Sienna is definitely an esper that is super important to max skill up because of just reducing the cooldown and increasing her turn cycling and just throwing out her skills more efficiently. So especially like her third skill into a second skill combination with the skill cooldown reduction. On top of that, you have ocean waves, all that kind of good stuff. She is a tremendous powerhouse. Now, Tang Xuan is actually going to require a lot of skill ups, and I feel like he does require full skill ups in order to function. And the reason for that is his third skill and his second skill has super freaking low cooldowns. His second skill has a cooldown of 2 turns, his third skill has a cooldown of 3 turns, which is very, very remarkable. And of course, the DPS factor as well and all that, right? A lot of stuff packed into his kit. And he's seeing more use at 0.118 right now. I'm starting to see that he has more value because of the AoE damage that he has, and the kind of support that he has, and you know, the once in a while you have a defense break, that kind of helps a little bit sometimes. But I'm in between useful and not urgent right now, because I think in most early game and mid game content, he's not an Esper that really thrives a lot. I still feel like Liling thrives a little bit better than him, so I think maybe go to not urgent. I don't think he's an Esper that you really need to invest into unless you really just want to have fun. He's kind of like one of those fun Espers in my opinion. Now, Tever is an Esper that does not need skill ups at all. He's able to cycle his third skill super well, so he just needs to throw his third skill once, then throw his first skill, and then he can throw his third skill again. You don't need to skill him up to reduce any cooldowns. It is not essential, it's just to increase his damage output, and that's about it. Now, next up we have Tia, and I think she's gonna go straight into the not urgent tier for the mere fact that I don't use her at full skill ups at all. I don't even drop a single skill up on her at all. And she works perfectly fine. And the reason for that is her trigger chance, or rather her proc chance, doesn't actually increase on her third skill with skill up. So let's take a look at Tia over here. So as you can see, it's just the damage that goes up and just the cooldown. But the thing is, her cooldown duration is really so long that I don't feel like she is necessarily an Esper that I want to focus so much in PvE content. So I don't really need her cooldowns to be like 0, for example. I don't need it to be super low. But the thing is, for her second skill, yes, her proc chance of landing the stun actually increases from 50% to 60%, which is a small change, but it's still a change, right? But the thing is, I feel like, you know, just a speed down and a chance to stun, that's enough for her kit, because her main selling point is her third skill, especially in PvP. You just need to throw it at the start and you already have the huge advantage. Now, next up for Tricky, I feel like he's an Esper that is useful at full skill ups. His proc chance is not gonna go up like a tremendous amount, right? So from 80% all the way to 100%, it is not a tremendous amount because he triple hits. So with a triple hit, there is a good chance that you're going to strip most of the important buffs away. So most teams out there run with like 2 buffs, right? You have like an immunity, you have a defense buff, or maybe you have a shield buff. But in most cases, players don't have like 1,000 buffs, because not everyone has like an Abigail team, for example. So I feel like him at no skill ups is actually good enough, right? Like for example, do you necessarily need your first skill to be full skill ups? For the extra trigger chance, I don't really think so. And then next we have Unas, who is going to go straight into S tier, so he needs the cooldown reduction so that he can cycle his skills more efficiently, right? Especially his third skill. So that skill with a cooldown of 3 turns needs to go out as fast as possible so that you can constantly push your entire team up with AP. And then next we have Yuntruan. I feel like he's an Esper that is actually not so urgent. So after using him for quite a bit of time, I don't feel like he's an Esper that really needs the skill ups, because I don't feel like he really needs his third skill to go up so frequently, because there are other Espers who can fill in the gaps, for example. So if you need a speed up, there are other Espers who can bring it in your team. So for example, if you're talking about Fafnir, right, you don't need him to bring the speed up, you can use Meredith. And the same goes for like Dark Starlight, for example, if that's where he shines the most anyway, right? You can definitely bring other Espers that can bring speed up, and you can definitely bring other Espers that brings the speed down as well. So his usefulness is just in the true damage factor in his kit, which you can use right from the get-go at 0 skill ups. Now next up we have Zora, and I feel like she's one of those Espers that is very useful with skill ups because her cooldown reduces by 1 and she becomes more viable in many different content, for example, because of her AoE defense break, especially at R2, right? Okay, so I should preface that I'm talking about her in her R2 state, where she has a defense break on her third skill. And then finally we have Cang Ji, and I think based on my preliminary observations of him, I feel like he's not an Esper that is very worth the skill up, for the mere fact that he truly shines at R2 and above and in RTA, which is not a content that a lot of people are excited about right now. There's only like a very small handful of you guys who are going to go crazy about RTA, but I wouldn't really recommend you to invest into an Esper that is just strictly meant for RTA at this current point, because there is just not a lot of value that you can get out of that content for you to warrant like investing 10 Abilimons into him, for example. So with that said, that's the end of this tier list. Let me know your opinions and your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know what you agree with, let me know what you disagree with, and let me know what else I can change in my perspective as well, because I know everything that I say comes directly from my own opinion and my opinion only. So if there's anything egregious that I said that completely pissed you off, let me know as well. I'm very curious to know where I'm wrong about certain Espers, because I know I have a lot to learn just like everyone else, right, basically. So with that said, hope you guys enjoyed today's content. If you did, don't forget to thumbs up, it really helps the channel, and subscribe for more Dislyte content. Now that's it, this has been Very Free to Play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.